Hey, folks, you're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hendricks, and today we have a very unique guest with us. Her name is Jodi. Jodi has a job. I always ask my guests in every interview if there was another career that they would like to do, what would it be? And I've made a career in the fire service, but I have to be honest, I flirted with being a voice actor a number of years ago and realized I don't speak goodly enough to make a go at it. So I'm hoping to live vicariously through Jodi. Welcome, Jodi. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's go ahead and start off with just a little snapshot of your childhood, your early upbringing, and kind of how you first got into the voiceover.
Ooh, well, I mean, from early on, I've been a singer. So my parents were both
Mm,
musical, and when we were kids, we had sing along time, not story time.
okay.
So, yeah, so that's kind of how I started with my voice, but it didn't really become voiceover until later on. And I kind of did both left and right brain stuff. So I've been a computer nerd since about 86.
Mhm.
And I love computers, and I spent a majority of my working life in the computer industry or selling hardware or software or that kind of thing, learning the internet, doing internet marketing and SEO, that kind of thing. And in 95, 96, I volunteered my time at the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, the
Mm.
CNIB, and I was doing articles. I was reading articles onto reel to reel tape at the time.
Oh my.
And yeah, yeah.
Splicing and doing all that.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that was because they were a government entity and they didn't have all the newest computer stuff,
Right.
or if that's really the equipment they had in 95, 96. But because I think DAT was starting to come out previous to that. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, so I did that for a number, just like a little bit there, and it kind of it piqued my interest. And I didn't really start looking into voiceover as a full time job until I got super bored in 2007 doing internet marketing and SEO when Google became it.
Hmm.
And I was just, it just became less art and more science.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, the same thing holds today. Content is king. If you have content, I mean, it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
So I got bored, and in 2007, I decided, well, maybe I should start looking into what this voiceover thing entails, and I just kind of went for it.
So when you say went for it, did you start doing like audiobooks, or did you happen to stumble into a commercial, or did you do on-air talent like radio, or what was the initial spark?
Well, initially for me, it was all advertising. So
Okay.
I have never done an audiobook in my life and never
Mm.
intend to.
Yeah.
And my focus has always been on commercials, corporate narration, branding, advertising, marketing, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
just because I find that more fascinating than any other aspect. And for me, I've always been a sprinter, not a marathoner. So I tend to do things that are 5 minutes of finished audio or less. That's
Mm.
kind of where I've focused my career. But really, in the beginning, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
So I knew internet marketing. I knew the internet, and I knew that putting out a website and saying I can do this would ultimately get me somewhere.
Mhm.
And I didn't really do anything other than put together a website and send away for a CD set to sort of teach me the basics.
Oh, wow.
So there was a company put together, and I think he's just retired now. Actually, a fellow named Mike Kirby here in Toronto, in the Toronto, Canada area,
Mhm.
and I sent away for his CD booklet and all of the instructions. They didn't even really have anything like Zoom, so you couldn't do anything remotely. You would have to show up in person. You
Oh,
didn't have
yeah.
a choice. And so I used that as the basis for a corporate demo, a corporate narration demo that I thought I could work on. And then I went searching on the internet, And unfortunately, I landed on a demo mill, what they call a place that will basically take your credit card and give you no instruction, but put
Mm,
something together that sounds okay, but you don't have the training, so it still sounds like crap. you know, that kind of idea.
sure.
And I spent a lot of money in those beginning years that I didn't really have to spend, and went on a message board and said, because I didn't know, this is yay, here's my new demos, yay, what do you
Hmm.
think? And everyone on the message board was like, what are you doing?
Oh, man. That's a rough
uh
lesson to learn, isn't it?
it's yeah, it was a rough lesson. And I actually credit the person who was the most critical of those demos with helping me create a career, really, because he was the first person who told me, this is actually acting.
Yeah.
And you have none. So let's work on that.
You are. I mean, the competition now for being a voice actor is very similar to being I don't know what you call it, a movie actor, I guess, or a visual actor.
Yeah, I don't know if I would quite put it on par with that
Okay.
just yet, but it is definitely a lot more competitive. Yeah,
Mm,
because like I was saying before, you don't know what you don't know.
right.
And unless you get a coach, unless you understand what voice acting really is, where it can be used, how it can be used, what you're contributing to, then it's really hard to have a career. And these days there are a lot of people saying they're voice actors out there, and a lot of people reaching out to people all over the place. And the people who are in positions to hire people like that get inundated day in, day out.
Mm.
So yeah, because it's become more, quote, commonplace, it's a little harder to stand out. Yeah.
Now, I'll compliment you here for just a minute. Your voice is very warm. It's easy to listen to. It's not high pitched. You don't have much of an accent. I've got kind of a mess of hodgepodge of words that people can't quite figure out where I'm from sometimes. But a little bit
That's
of West
good.
Coast, a little bit of South. But I don't think I could be a voice actor just because my pronunciation is not there.
I
But
don't know. I mean, you sound fine to me. Also,
oh,
when you're talking about commercial work, a lot of the people who do commercial work, you can't be so pronunciation heavy, if that makes sense. You need to
okay.
slur your words a little. You need to be a real person.
Okay.
So in a sense, having a voice that sounds pretty can
Mhm.
work against you. So it
Oh,
depends on where you are in the voice industry. What are you trying to do with it? If you're into the commercial, then yeah, you don't need to be perfect. That's not what they're after. They're after you and your perspective.
are they looking for a relational authenticity like that could be my neighbor?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. There's
What
lots of different types of commercials that would be out there, and it just depends on where you fit. And what ends up happening is that we think we would fit into a certain spot, and then we get hired for things that we didn't think we would get hired for, and
hmm.
suddenly that's where we fit.
Well, when I was looking at your website, you have a pretty deep resume of companies that you have done work for, like HGTV, Subway, Frito-Lay, Bose speakers, Dell computers. Those aren't everybody knows those companies, so you're obviously, a major player. What are these companies? Is there something that they're all looking for that you can deliver, or are you in a specific lane and I don't even know what to call it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I am in a specific lane because each voice is different and each voice has a quote brand of their own.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what they're after. If their brand is, they might be looking for a warm resonance, then sure. But if they're looking for, a 20-year-old uh, kid who knows what they know, and
Yeah.
they're your next door neighbor or whatever, they're not going to hire me. So It really depends on what the branding is of the specific commercial. And
Hmm.
this is why I tend to talk about audio branding, because I think it's important for voice actors and a lot of people to understand what audio branding really is and how the brand of a company isn't just in the visuals, but also in the audio. So it's in how they sound as well. They appeal to a certain market, and a certain sound is going to appeal to a certain market. So you have to fit that.
That's also the name of your podcast, Audio
Mhm.
Branding Podcast, correct?
Yep. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Where
I've been doing that
just
for 5 years now.
5 years. Wow, yeah, because I saw you had hundreds of episodes on your
Yeah, we're
website.
approaching 300 right now.
Wow,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
So
I really enjoy it.
you mentioned a minute ago about getting a coach. Is that something that if someone is wanting to get into your line of work, do they typically get a coach, or is that something you realize later on, I probably need to get a coach? What's most common?
Well, I do think that a coach is imperative if you're going to try being a voice actor, because that
Mm,
coach not only has the information to tell you how to use your voice, how to use your instrument in a way that will be useful for clients, but they also have that ability to tell you how to find jobs.
mm.
So and where you should look and what genres there are and which other coaches are out there that could help you in those different genres and what conferences are out there that you could go to where you could meet fellow voice actors and talk over the different positions and the different genres and the different trials and tribulations that you have as a voice actor. And there's all sorts of ways to go about this, but the quickest way really is to get a coach.
What you mentioned a few things that a coach will help you do, but as far as your instrument, which I think is an excellent way to describe your voice,
Mhm.
what what are they going to help you do? Like the nuts and bolts, your first few sessions with a coach
Well,
vocally.
one of the things that they can really help with is to let you know how, for instance, a directed session might go.
Ah,
So, a lot of the technical stuff about working with clients in a remote session, for instance, or the recording that you're going to have to do, because as a voice actor, yes, I'm creating the voice, I'm providing the performance of that script, but I'm also the one who has to record it on occasion, usually.
hmm.
So in a way, that's kind of me being like an audio engineer. And that doesn't mean that I have to know all of the nuts and bolts of being an audio engineer. I basically know enough to be dangerous.
Okay. It helps to
That's
be familiar, I'm sure.
but it does help to be familiar with how to record your voiceovers, how to edit them, what bare minimum things your client might expect on the other end, and be able to supply those so that you fulfill your duties as a voice actor in as uh, comprehensive a way as possible so that your client isn't worried that you might not be able to do what you tell them you can do. And also beyond that, a coach will help you understand what the acting is all about. So there is acting in this. Even if you're speaking a commercial,
Hmm.
you need to sound natural in a very unnatural situation. So
Okay.
I'm looking at a script. I'm in my booth, which is a 5x4 area, and I am looking at a script, but there's no one in front of me. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm looking at a screen. I may have headphones on. I'm talking into a microphone. What am I imagining? How am I going to sound in that kind of an environment so that I don't sound like I'm reading and I actually sound like I'm having a conversation with someone?
Hmm.
And people think that it's just speaking words, but no, that is acting.
You're conveying emotion through your words, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You're having a conversation with someone. It's always a conversation.
Do you typically memorize your lines before you
Oh
go
God,
in?
no.
Okay. Okay, note to self. All right.
No, I don't need to do that, thankfully.
Oh,
I
good.
usually have the words in front of me. Someone else has written the script,
Okay.
thankfully.
All right.
I just have to interpret it to the best of my ability and make it sound like it would naturally come out of someone's mouth.
I'm assuming you get these weeks in advance and you can kind of prepare a little bit, right?
Well,
Your
sometimes,
script.
but especially if you're in a live session, you don't want to over prepare, because if you over prepare and you get set in your ways and then they try
Ah,
to direct you out of that, that's another thing that a live session or enough live sessions will teach you. And that is that you need to be able to be directable. So you may think that the script should be interpreted this particular way, but maybe they want you to emphasize a different word than the one that you thought you were going to be emphasizing. So then you have to switch it up and you have to do it in a different way. And if they ask for, let's say, an ABC of a particular line, what they're asking for is for you to repeat that line 3 times, but they're not saying to do it in exactly the same way all those 3 times. So you need to switch it up. You need to give them something different each time that you do that line.
okay.
And being able to make those changes on the fly sometimes, and occasionally being able to put in some improv if they ask you about that kind of thing, and being directable out of what you thought you were going to be doing is important as well.
Are there instances where, let's use an example for someone that you've done a commercial for, Bose speakers. Is there someone there that's a representative of Bose that's listening to this and going, I don't really like what I'm hearing. Can you do this or that? Or do you create a small catalog of options of the same thing, different emphasis on different words and whatnot, send it to them and then they choose the one they like? Is that how that plays out?
It depends. If they want a live session, then yes, someone is listening in and then telling me that, that was okay, but let's try it this way.
Okay.
Or, okay, I can see where you're going with that, but let's try emphasizing this word instead.
Okay.
Or, that kind of a thing. And it there's usually an engineer on the other end recording me on their end. So there are various remote possible connections and software pieces that you sort of need to understand. So again, that comes with coaching. It comes with understanding what the remote options are.
Hmm.
There's a bunch of them. Source Connect is one of the ones that is most prominent right now. But in Europe, for instance, they use something called Session Link Pro, which is a similar type of software to software thing, but more used in that area. So it depends, and like I said, a coach will be able to give you some ideas of how this might go. But, there are still clients who come to me, specifically corporate narration. This happens a lot in corporate narration, where they ask you to, just do 2 or 3 takes of a script, depending on how long it is, and you change it up. You do it in different ways. Or I will do a couple of full takes of the script, but I might repeat a line or something like that. Or I might repeat the beginning in a different way or the ending in a different way, just to give them some options. And then they take that audio file and put together what they want with the video that they're working with. So, yeah, there's all sorts of ways that this could go. So it could be live direct, or it could be me just giving them an audio file. Usually it's a WAV file, and I send it using WeTransfer, and they take it from there.
You mentioned Europe just a minute ago when you were speaking. Is there a big need or draw for, I guess, American or Canadian, North American type accents over in Europe? I would seem like it would be mostly the other way around.
Yeah, it's a little less than, say, a North American client would normally request.
Mhm.
And a lot of the folks in Europe are after more British sounding voices than they are North American sounding voices. But it depends. If it's a big company and they have many different outlets or home bases or whatever for the company in all sorts of different places in the world, many of them have uh, uh, company headquarters in a whole bunch of different places. They might have them all over the US and Canada. And if that's the case, then it may be a European based company, but with uh, those outlets in North America, they need a North American voice to
Mm.
voice some internal or external videos. So it depends on the makeup of the company, really.
I don't know how it is in Canada, but it seems like in the United States, we're suckers for that British accent. All the commercials and the selling stuff on TV always see if they throw a British accent on it for some reason, it adds some air of legitimacy to it. I don't know why
Yeah.
we fall for that. It sounds more sophisticated than us, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a branding thing.
Yeah,
Definitely. I don't
yeah.
think that's unusual, yeah.
So the recording aspect of things is the majority. I know you mentioned the live sessions, but is the majority of your work done from home or locally, or do you have to travel a lot, or did that change as your career progressed?
That definitely changed as my career progressed. I
Okay.
used to have to go to downtown Toronto a lot
Mm,
because in the Toronto area, at least, kind of like New York and Chicago and LA, they expect you to be in the studio.
hmm.
What changed was when COVID happened, a lot of people decided that they were going to stay home, and
Yeah.
a lot of the studios ended up either closing or opening with like a minimum amount of staff because the voice actors that they were relying on to do the work didn't have home studios
Mm,
and had to go in. And I've had a home studio basically since 2011. So I'm pretty used to this. And when COVID happened, I was able to provide voiceover services from my home with no problems at all, sounding very good. So a lot of my Canadian clients and the studios in this area were okay with me being at home. And at this point, I don't go into downtown Toronto because it takes me about an hour and a half to get there.
mm.
With traffic. Traffic's awful here, just really horrendously horrible.
Yeah.
And if I don't have to spend 3 hours of my time in traffic
Sure.
and then another 4 hours, let's say, in the studio, I can work with more clients on my end from my home studio, and my day doesn't just have to be one job.
Is your home studio, I mean, I've seen online some of the small booths that have the acoustic panels on the inside and a desk and a spot for a microphone. They're not very large, but I don't know, is that what you have at home in a bedroom, or how do you have your setup?
I have an office here with a 5x4 sound treated booth.
Oh,
And inside it, I don't have a whole lot of foam and like darkness in there. Like a lot of people, it's like really dark in there
mhm,
because the walls of this booth are really thick. It's basically covered in light colored canvas, really,
okay,
and so it's fairly light in there, thankfully.
mhm,
And I just have a little shelf, and I have my mirrored monitor in there that mirrors my outside computer, and I have a USB keyboard and mouse, and everything. I can operate my computer outside here, inside in the booth at the same time that I'm recording. So that makes it much easier.
do you typically stand or are you seated when you record your stuff?
I'm seated, but I'm on a knee chair.
Okay.
So it's an interesting kind of setup, yeah.
To jump back to when you were early on in
Mhm.
your career, were there certain mistakes that you made that when you look back, you think, all right, I should have done this? Or are there common things that people, when they're new to voice acting, they typically sound too much like an announcer or a radio DJ from the 80s? Or is there something they might slide into that is common when you're new?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing that I was talking about previously was that I didn't get a coach when I should
Hmm.
have gotten a coach. So that was the number 1 mistake. The number 2 mistake was getting my first demos done at a demo mill because
Right.
I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I needed to understand that this was actually acting. So the third mistake is to assume that it's just speaking words because
Mm,
it's really not just speaking words.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, and I think that, as you say, a lot of people start off copying other people, but it took me probably 10 years in. This is year 17 now
Wow.
or 18, I think, something like that. Like I
Mhm.
started in 2007. So yeah. And one of the things that I've learned over time is that I am being hired because I'm being me.
Yeah.
So I'm not being hired to be someone else. I'm being hired to be me with my perspective, with my background, with my assumptions, with, all of my biases, whatever those happen to be,
Mhm.
that's what I'm being hired for that. So, first of all, everything that you do has a bearing on what you're doing now. And don't assume that anything that you did is unimportant
Mm.
because that gives you perspective. And that is your perspective. And it's not going to be anyone else's. Your perspective is unique. And people want to hire your unique perspective speaking their script. They're not looking for a sound alike to someone on the television that's already there. If they wanted to hire that person, they'd hire that person.
Yeah.
Right.
What
So,
is
yeah, it's something I had to learn over time, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. What do you like most about your job? What's the thing where it's just as simple as I get to speak for a living and it's fun and I enjoy it and the variety? Or
Mhm.
is there some other intangible that just really gets you up in the morning? And on the flip side, what do you dislike most about your job?
Well, I love that I get to interpret a script
Hmm.
that someone has sent to me, and maybe they just heard something in their, their ears, in their head, some kind of interpretation, and I can speak it in a way that they didn't realize that they needed to hear it spoken, and somehow that worked better.
Hmm.
So, for me, that's a thrill, and
Yeah.
it's a thrill for me to be a part of someone's audio brand. That's why I talk about audio branding, because I think it's so important. Being a part of the sound of someone's business is, it's a privilege. It's a wonderful thing to say that I can be a part of, and I'm honored to be a part of it,
Hmm.
and that someone thought that I could interpret their script in a way that matches what they visualize and hear that their company would be presenting to the world. That to me is there's nothing like that. That's amazing to me. That's why I love the advertising and marketing branding aspect of this kind of thing. I get charged by it. It's so much fun. And what don't I like about it? My goodness. Uh there's not a whole lot that I don't like about it, but I am not a huge fan of the audio editing
Yeah.
myself.
Hmm.
So, as soon as I could, I farmed that out to someone else who's way better at it than I am. So
Yeah.
at this point, I do short audio editing myself. I will do something that's maybe 2 or 3 minutes of audio editing and I'm fine. But anything longer than that, and I'll pass it off to an editor who can do it in a quarter of the time I could do it
Yeah.
and enjoys it a lot more than I do.
Hmm. Besides your coach that you mentioned earlier on in your career, has there been anybody that has been a bit of a mentor to you or somebody in your industry that you've really learned a lot from, or they've kind of taken you under their wing? Or were you kind of I forged my own path and did this pretty much on my own?
Well, when I was first starting and I told you I was on that message board, the
Yeah.
fellow who was the one who criticized what I put out there the loudest, and
Hmm.
then I went away. I had my butthurt moment, and then I went and private messaged him on the message board and just, asked him, "What can I do? Like, I've spent all this money and now I don't know what to do."
Mm.
And he took me under his wing, and this was back in 2008. So we were just exchanging emails and files and MP3s and such, and he would send me a script and have me perform it, and then, give me some instruction and then have me perform it again and send the file. And like, he took me under his wing and made me understand that this was acting. It wasn't just speaking words, that
Hmm.
I had to care about what I was talking about and understand that this was someone else's words, but they were important, and to care about that. And that's how you make your voice work. That's how you make it perform, by understanding that this is important to somebody. And there's there's a certain amount of um, care that you need to take with that,
Hmm.
because someone's expecting that you're going to care about those words as much as they do. And he was a veteran voice actor from Chicago. His name is Lee Kane. He's still out there.
Oh,
And we haven't really spoken very much in the last many years, but I know he's still out there doing his thing.
yeah.
And yeah, I credit my whole career. He allowed me to learn and understand and figure out what I had to offer people as a voice actor, and that was super important.
You know, the thing about that experience that you had is that, yes, it was unpleasant to hear the negative critique of your first demo, but this gentleman had some constructive criticism, but you were also teachable. And you
Yeah.
thought, okay, I don't like hearing that, but the only way I'm going to get better, this guy seems to know what he's talking about. I'm going to lean into it and I'm going to put my feelings aside.
Mhm.
And that's something that a lot of folks I think need to remember is that criticism doesn't always mean they're just attacking you. They may
Oh,
be
yeah.
trying to help you even if it's unpleasant to hear.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you haven't really failed unless you don't get up again.
Yeah.
That's really the bottom line for me. I'm stubborn as hell.
I was determined. I was not gonna let it end there.
Well, yeah, you got to keep going. You can't give up.
Yeah,
You can apply that to just about anything in life.
you totally can. Yeah.
What soft skills in would lend someone to success in your line of work? We just probably tapped on one right there is the stick to itiveness. You just got
Oh,
to
yeah,
keep going.
determination.
Yeah. But are there other skills that people in your industry all seem to share, or do you get a whole mix of introverts and extroverts and the whole gamut?
Well, you do get a good mix, and I am a raging introvert, so I
Really?
love being behind the mic and
Ah, I
not
get
in
it.
front of it. But being an introvert doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy. It just means that you get your energy back by being by yourself,
Yeah.
having peace. That's all it means.
Hmm.
An extrovert gets that by being in a bunch of people and speaking with people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the differences there. But I would also say communication is really a important skill, because a lot of your outreach is going to be in messages. It's going to be in email. It's going to be on LinkedIn. It's going to be in Facebook groups or wherever you happen to find groups where voiceover people gather. And and being able to speak to people is a really good skill to have as well. So communication is huge, and yeah, otherwise tenacity. If you don't stick to it, you're
Yeah.
going to stop before you could have made it a thing. So yeah, that's definitely a big thing. I would say, even if you are not the one that is organizing yourself, you need somebody, or you need to be able to organize yourself, because while you're starting, it may not be such a big deal, but when you start to have regular clients, you need to be able to plan your day. You need to be
Yeah.
able to organize things. You need to be able to remember to send out an invoice.
Hmm.
You're not going to get paid if you don't send out your invoice.
That's something that I've been learning with this podcast is it started to get some traction at last year in the fall, and I already have a full-time job in the fire service, and then I started doing this thinking, well, I'll just do a podcast. Sounds like fun. Next thing you know, I've got a second full-time job, and
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of work. I get it.
I did not realize, I have to admit, I didn't come into it with the understanding of the time commitment with researching people on LinkedIn, looking at their website or
Mhm.
the reels or whatever on YouTube for before an interview, trying to find out a little bit about their career. So I'm somewhat informed. Emails, phone calls, texts, it can take on a life of its own. If you're not organized, it'll get away from you quick.
Oh, it totally can. Yeah. I'm really lucky in that I've had the same audio video editor since I started.
Ah,
He's a fellow voice actor in Portugal named Umberto Franco. And
hmm,
if Umberto was not a part of this production that I have, it would not happen. there's just there's just no way. So I would say that a lot of the things that people forget is that you don't have to do everything yourself.
hmm,
So I think a lot of people decide, oh, I'm going to outsource when I make enough money, when I
yeah,
make this money. Well, you know what? Outsourcing doesn't have to cost all that much. And if you are outsourcing to do things that you don't want to do or that you're delaying or that takes time away from the thing that you really want to be doing that makes you money, then you are delaying your development
hmm.
really by not having that thing outsourced. So outsource as soon as you can because that's just going to make things more sane for you.
I got to write that down because I think I'm getting to the breakover point where I could,
Yeah.
yeah, I could use some help. But
A
it's
lot of
still,
people get to that point and think they can't afford it, but
no,
you can. And it's less about affording it and more about freeing up your time to do more of what actually makes you money.
yeah. What has, I mean, you talked early in this conversation about the reel to wheel reel that you utilized, but I can only imagine the technological changes that you have seen in your career. Now, everything with the internet and apps
Social
and,
media.
yeah, social media and studios from home and things of that nature.
Yep.
It's it's really kind of exciting how more attainable or achievable it is without having to have a huge dedicated studio that no one can really afford.
Well, yeah, and the equipment now has gotten much cheaper. Really, the
Yeah.
only thing that you have to sink a certain amount of money into is your microphone.
Mhm.
But again, even that, you don't have to have a super expensive microphone when you're just starting out. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes time. You'll have your workhouse of a workhorse of a microphone to start you off with, and then as you go, you are able to afford more things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it depends. It can happen slowly, but it's a lot less of a financial investment these days than it ever was. And that's partially responsible for how many people are becoming voice actors, putting out the shingle, and then flooding the market.
Yeah. What microphone do you use, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, the microphone that I'm using right now is the one that I use in my videos, which, is outside of my studio.
Hmm.
So when I'm on video, it actually is colored. It has an LED light inside
Oh.
it that actually matches my branding, which
Huh.
I love.
Yeah,
It's
that's
called a
cool.
HyperX, and it's a USB condenser mic. So it's really not that expensive at all. It's like $100 or something.
Really?
Uh, but the one inside my studio is a Sennheiser 416, which is a shotgun mic,
Ah,
and that's a $1,200 mic.
yeah. Sennheiser makes good stuff. I've got
They
their
do.
headphones and I really enjoy the
Mhm.
sound.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
S
excellent.
So, if you weren't in your current career right now, is there anything else that you thought you may wanna do when you were younger? I know you were in marketing and things too, but was there always a career like, being a professional musician or something that was always on the fringes that is a dream?
Huh. Well, you know what? The dream of being a professional musician is a hugely stressful idea
Yeah,
to me right now.
I bet.
So, no, that is no longer a wish of mine, and
Mhm.
I wish all musicians every success because, wow, is it tough out there.
Yeah.
And I had a songwriting website from 95 until about 2016. And so I watched the whole Napster thing happen. I saw it happen in real time,
Wow.
and it was heartbreaking. So yeah, I know how hard it is for musicians, for songwriters.
Mhm.
I don't know what they're doing these days and how they're making ends meet. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. uh, as far as what I would do, honestly, this is all I can imagine doing. I love it. And when I was going to university, I actually tried to get into psychology.
Oh,
And the funny thing about that was that I have absolutely no um, talent for math.
Yeah,
Absolutely none.
me either.
And so so I walked into my first statistics course, which you had to take in order to
Mhm.
continue in the psychology department, and well, let's just say I knew he was speaking English words. I
I know.
understood that
Yeah.
it was English that he was speaking, but they
Yes.
made no sense in my brain.
Right. No,
The
I can relate to
combination
that.
of those words together made absolutely no sense to me, and I knew psychology would not be my calling.
That is a horrible feeling too when you're going, "I recognize
Oh,
this language, but I have no idea what's being said at
it
all."
was awful. It
Yeah.
was truly terrifying. Yes. So I went through English, and I guess my whole thing has been communications.
Mm.
So communications has been my go-to ever since my university days. So yeah, I this is why I love what I do, because I'm communicating every day.
Now, let's go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I wanna talk about you have a band on the side. Tell us about that, and it is we talked before the interview started. It's in a genre of music that I hadn't heard of before. I think I'm the oddball out on this one. Most people probably have, but
Oh, I don't know
tell
about that.
tell us about what it is. It's very unique.
Well, it's a genre called filk, Filk,
Mm,
and originally this was a typo on a stencil, I think, in the '70s. They were trying to say folk music and they made a typo. And this is the music that happens at science fiction fantasy conventions. So, like a Star Trek convention or a fantasy or science fiction literature convention or this
hmm,
kind of a thing. And what would happen would be that a bunch of musicians would end up attending these conventions, and then they would set aside some time after all of the things had happened during the day in the evening, and they'd sit around in a circle and sing together or play guitar or whatever music, whatever instruments they happen to have, kind of like singing around a campfire.
okay.
And these were called Filk circles. And there are now actually conventions that are only for the music.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So and they happen all over. So it's a genre that's very specific. Like there's probably only maybe, I don't know, 5,000 people or less around the world that do this.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So I have been in a band called Urban Tapestry since '94, and we haven't done anything in quite some time.
Yeah.
We've sort of been hanging around the filk scene, but not really performing a whole lot. And the last time that we put out a CD was in 2002.
I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, remember CDs? Yeah. But I also have been a member of a 9-person jazz swing band that also does some folk music at a convention in Atlanta every year. And this is the one live performance that I've done really, for a long time. And we've been together for around 20 or so years. And the band is called Play It with Moxie. And we're the house band basically for that small folk convention in Atlanta that happens every year in January.
Is folk music just instrumental, or is there
No,
vocals?
no, it's music that has, words and singing and all that
Okay.
sort of stuff. Yeah.
And do you sing or play an instrument or both?
I sing. That is what
Okay.
I do. I am a singer.
So, can they find if someone wanted to listen to your music, where can they find that? Are you on Apple or YouTube or anything like that?
Well, I actually did a album of my own in 2015 called Time Will Tell,
Oh,
and people can find me on Spotify and Apple and all the places under that name. If they just look up my name and Time Will Tell, they'll find that album out there.
okay.
So, yeah.
You're gonna get some new fans from this, I'm sure of it. So, one question that always is at the top of people's minds when I'm discussing a career with a guest, and that is the topic of pay. Is there any feedback, advice, expectation setting that you can do when it comes to the voiceover realm and pay? How is it typically structured? What can you expect to maybe get when you're early on, or is that too broad of a question?
Well, there is something called the GVAA rate guide. So if
Okay.
people look that up on the internet and find that rate guide, they'll see kind of how it's broken down. Generally, it's a license rather than a buyout. So
Okay.
it depends. If it's non-broadcast, so that means no paid placement anywhere. For me, that's what that means. So that means no paid placement on a podcast. It's not
Mhm.
being paid to be promoted anywhere, but it's an internal or external narration that's on a video or something like that on a company website or their YouTube channel, or they use it organically in their social media.
Mm.
That's non broadcast. That can have a buyout. And, typically people will, it just depends. Like I have a rate guide, but someone else's rate guide would be different from mine. It would depend on how long it's being used, how many people are listening to it, where it's being used, that kind of thing. So, every voice actor for non broadcast is probably going to have a set rate guide. But when it comes to broadcast, that's paid placement, that's commercials on TV or radio or streaming or podcast or, you know, uh, any kind of a television on demand or that kind of thing. If it's being paid to be in place, then that's a different thing entirely. And that is very much on a licensing basis. So it's kind of like licensing a piece of music for being used in a project or a photograph or something like that that you might pay to use in a major magazine or something like that. And again, it will depend on how many people are going to hear it, which media it's being used in, and how long it's going to be used, and the geographical area. So there's a lot of different aspects to think about in this. But what I will say is that if someone is hiring you for a voice acting job, it doesn't matter if it's your first job or your 50th or your 500th. You deserve to be paid whatever you need to be paid for that job.
Mhm.
So it's all about whether they're paying to have it placed and what they're paying you to do. And there are standard rates for voiceover across the board. The GVAA will give you a good idea of where those stand.
At the end of the day, when you've been doing recording and then you maybe do an episode of your podcast or, you use your voice a lot and you also described yourself as an introvert earlier. Do you find when you get home, you're just, I don't want to talk?
That's a good question. Yeah, I do like to have peace and quiet and
Mm.
silence.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's me. Like a lot of people to relax, they'll listen to music. I
Hmm.
don't. And the reason I don't is because as a singer, I pay too much attention to what's happening in the nuts
Uh,
and bolts of that piece of music.
hmm.
And so it's hard for me to just listen to a piece of music and relax. I end up picking it apart.
It's kind of mentally tiring to be so
Yes, exactly.
immersed
It
in it.
gives me a
Yeah.
headache. It
Right.
doesn't make me relax. So so yeah, for me, I need silence or I need to watch something. I watch a lot of anime. I will admit right now,
Really?
because it's completely mindless in a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
There are so many tropes. I understand those tropes and I'm comfortable with them and I can just relax and not pay too much attention.
That's funny.
It depends on the anime, of course,
I
but
would have never have guessed you. You're an onion. You just pull another layer, and there's another layer of Jodi right there. I would have never
yeah,
have guessed that.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I do watch a lot of anime and yeah, I like just relaxing with mindless entertainment.
Hmm. Yeah, I find myself watching. I'll get on YouTube and I'll watch a guy pressure wash a brick house in
Oh, isn't that
Boston.
satisfying though?
It is. It's instant gratification. There's no
Yeah.
narration at all. It's
Yep.
just the mold is gone, and I
Yeah.
and I don't know
I
why
think
that's
there's
so satisfying.
exactly. I think there's a guy out there, and I think I first saw his videos on Facebook, actually. He goes out and, cuts down people's lawns
Yes,
for
I've seen
free.
that. Uh huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so satisfying to watch this, and he
Yeah.
just, like, forwards it, like, he fast forwards it.
Yeah. Well, I
And
don't
it's
I don't
just
know
yeah.
what part of the human brain that scratches, but it's just, it's so easy to watch and so satisfying that I'll just
Yeah.
watch one right after the other.
Yeah, it's almost meditative. I
Yeah.
watch ASMR for the same reason.
Oh, yeah. I haven't gotten quite into the people that scratch the microphone and do the feathers and talk. I don't quite
Yeah,
get that part of it, but
there's all sorts of different triggers, that's what they
yeah.
call them, triggers.
Okay. All right.
So it just depends on what does it for you.
Okay.
And there's all sorts of different things out there, and, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with a different trigger being something, and
No.
maybe scratching on a mic isn't your thing.
Yeah, yeah,
You
everybody's got
know,
a
like
different itch to scratch.
yeah, like mouth noise for me drives me crazy. So, if I
Yeah,
hear someone in an ASMR video having mouth noise that close to the mic, I'm just I go nuts.
yeah.
I have to turn it. I cannot watch or listen. It just drives me crazy.
My
So, yeah,
goodness.
everyone has different but there are people who love that.
Yeah. I think I need to find one of those people to interview that has made a career out of ASMR.
You know, if you do, let me know, because I have been trying to find someone to come on my podcast for that, and
Oh,
I cannot for the life of me find someone who does it regularly that I can actually interview,
hmm.
because I find it psychologically so fascinating. And
Yeah.
because I talk about the power of sound and how it influences us,
Mhm.
that to me is just super fascinating.
Well, I mean, we're connected on LinkedIn, so I absolutely will. If I can find somebody, I'll make the connection, no doubt.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if people wanted to hire you for voiceover work or to find your podcast or to just learn more about you, where can they find you?
My website is voiceoversandvocals.com, or for the podcast, they can just go to audiobrandingpodcast.com.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. This was really an enjoyable conversation. I was looking forward to this one just because I think your career is so cool. And I mean, for lack of a better word, and I just, I was really looking forward to it.
Well, thanks so much. This was a blast. I had a lot of fun.
You bet. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully, you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.